सर्वोपनिषदो गावः दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्स सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् नित्यात्मा असङ्गकर्मेह गोचराः साङ्ख्ययोगधीः द्वितीये स्थितधीलक्षा प्रोक्ता तन्मोह शान्तये. It seems there was this young man very troubled in life. He was so troubled that one day he decided to approach a wise master and started to share all his life problems with the master. And then the master duly asked him to bring a glass of water and then asked him to take a handful of salt and add the salt in the water. Not knowing what was going on, the young man went ahead and added a handful of salt in this glass of water. And then he was asked to stir the water and take a sip. Master said, take a sip of water. The moment he took the sip of water, before the master could say anything, he had to spit the water out. It was so salty. The master asked him, how did it taste? He said, horrible. And he said, come along with me. And then the master took him on a nice walk with one hand on his shoulder. Both of them walked along and reached a very nice lake, very serene. And then the master looked at the young man and said, why don't you now take a handful of salt and add the salt in the lake, in the water in the lake? The man went ahead, took the handful of salt, added it in the lake, stirred it, and the master said, why don't you now take a sip of water from the lake? The man took a handful of water and then tasted, and he felt so refreshed. And the master asked him, how did it taste? Immediately he said, so sweet and so refreshing. Master made him to sit beside him, looked at him and said, my dear young man, pain is like the salt. Pain in life is like the salt. The amount of pain in life is the same. The amount of pain in life is the same. But the amount we taste pain depends on the container in which we put it. The amount of pain in life is the same, but the amount of pain that we taste depends on the container in which we put it in. And therefore, whenever you go through any pain in life, all that is required is to expand your perspective. Expansive perspective helps you to endure any kind of pain. And then he added a very important statement. Looking at the young man's eyes, the master said, pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. Arjuna's pain has to be addressed. Arjuna is in a deep state of delusion, anguish. Last time when we concluded the first chapter of the Gita, where Arjuna, the valorous Arjuna, the most powerful warrior on the planet, equipped with all skills in archery, was not equipped to deal with unprecedented situation that unfolded on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. We have assembled here today to continue to relish and experience summaries of the Bhagavad Gita. Today, we are going to relish the summary of the second chapter of the Gita, Sankhya Yoga. Nityatma asanga karmeha gocharaha Sankhya yogadhihi dvitiye stithadhi laksha prokta tanmoha shantaye. This is the summary shloka of the second chapter of the Gita from the Gitartha Sangraha. The entire chapter is summarized in two beautiful verses, which give us a quick snapshot of what the second chapter of the Gita is all about. Nityatma, Nitya Atma, the eternal Atma, the eternal nature of the Atma. Asanga karmeha gocharaha. Asanga karma, doing actions rooted in the principle of detachment, which is karma yoga. Nityatma asanga karmeha gocharaha sankhya yoga dihi dvitiye stitadhi lakshat. Stitadhi laksha, the goal being to reach a state of steady wisdom, the state of what Krishna calls in the second chapter the state of a stita prajna, the man of steady wisdom, one with equipoised mind. Dvitiye stitadhi laksha prokta tanmoha shantaye. Tanmoha shantaye. In order to dispel Arjuna's delusion, Arjuna was deluded. In order to dispel his delusion, Krishna began his exposition. And right at the beginning, he takes up the topics of the nature of the Atma, Nityatma, Asanga Karmeha Gochara, the principle of Karma Yoga, Stithadhi Laksha, the nature of a Sthita Prajna, the man of steady wisdom. And thus, he begins to dispel Arjuna's delusion. So therefore, if we look at the second chapter, the way it is organized, the chapter continues from where the first chapter concluded. The first segment of the chapter is continuation of Arjuna's confusion. Confusion on what is the right thing to do. That's the first segment of the chapter. In response to Arjuna's confusion, Krishna gives a clarity on his identity. That is the second segment of the chapter. The third segment of the chapter then deals with the principle of Karma Yoga. And the fourth segment of the chapter deals with Sthita Prajna, the person of steady wisdom. So essentially, the second chapter comprises of these four sections. Now, in this world, there are two kinds of people, broadly. Broadly, we can classify people into two kinds. There are some who are wise, and then there are some who are otherwise. Gita is to enable those who are otherwise to become wise. If one is not wise, W-I-S-E, one will end up being wise, V-I-C-E. So it is very important for one to begin one's journey, spiritual journey, with a solid foundation of acquiring the knowledge of the self, the knowledge of one's true identity. Normally, I don't tend to use the word self. No. Unfortunately, English language has many limitations, and the widely used translation for the Atman is either the soul or the self. and both these words do not capture the essence of the word Atman. Because when we say self for the Atman and we also say one should not be selfish, then we are confused. So, translating Atman as self is very misleading. So, let us keep using the word Atman, which is essentially who we are, our true identity. Acquiring knowledge of the Atman. The second chapter is rightly titled as Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya, knowledge of the Atman, Yoga, Karma Yoga. It is in this chapter that Krishna introduces the foundation, the principles of Karma Yoga. So therefore, second chapter is appropriately called Sankhya Yoga, the knowledge of the Atman and the principle of Karma Yoga. Now, the central theme of Gita is what is the right thing to do? That is the driving question throughout the Gita. Arjuna also is confused. What is the right thing to do? What should I do, hey Krishna? I do not understand what is the action, right action that I should be executing. This is Arjuna's main question, and that is his confusion. Now, in order for us to know what is the right thing to do, it is first important to know who we are. What we think we are will determine the actions that we do. We possibly do not reflect on this too much. But then, every action that we do in our day-to-day lives, any action that we do is a manifestation of our own belief as to who we are. So therefore, Krishna asks Arjuna, Arjuna asks Krishna, hey Krishna, what is the right thing to do? Krishna says, wait, first let me know what you think who you are. Unless we are clear about our own identity, it becomes very difficult for us to decide on what is the right action and what is the wrong action. Now let's take a simple analogy of a judge. What is the right action? What is the right thing to do for a judge? To give the right judgment based on the arguments that happen in the court and do justice. Now, if the judge thinks that he is the judge, he will do the right action. It's very obvious. But then imagine there comes a case which involves the son of the judge. Now, and in this case, it is very clear that the son of the judge is on the wrong side. Now let us ask this question again. What is the right thing to do for the judge? The answer will be what the judge thinks about himself. If he thinks he is the judge, he will do the right action as a judge. If he thinks he is the father of his son, then he will be worried about protecting his son. Now, depending on what he or she thinks, the right action will be determined, isn't it? Arjuna had a similar dilemma, like all of us. On the one hand, he had to perform the role of a warrior. He's a Kshatriya. On the other hand, he is also a Kurunandana. When Arjuna started to think he is Kurunandana, that's where the problems started. How can I now kill the other Kurus, my own Kula, my own dynasty? How can I do? Exactly like how a judge starts to think, how can I now punish my own son? I have to protect him. There is a conflict here. As a father, his duty is to protect his son, no doubt. But as a judge, his duty is to do justice. there is a clear conflict in the two duties, two roles. Now, what is the right thing to do will depend on how I identify myself. If the judge identifies himself with he being the judge, the action will be different. If he identifies himself as a father, the action will be different. Therefore, first and foremost is to know our identity, who we are. It is our identity that will determine the nature of our actions. If I do not know my identity, now this is where the whole confusion is. What is my identity? Who am I? What is my identity? Because it looks like all of us have several identities. When I walk into my office, I have a different identity. Now I'm the boss in the office. When I come back home, I have a different identity. I'm not the boss. Somebody else is the boss. Identity changes. When I walk into satsang, my identity changes. I'm a bhakta. I walk into a party, my identity changes. I'm a party goer. It looks like we have so many identities. Because after all, we are operating in this world. And if we have to operate in this world, whether we like it or not, we will have many operational identities, functional identities. Because I have to function. No, I have to operate as a father. I have to operate as a friend. I have to operate as a husband. I have to operate as a boss. I have to operate as an employee. So all of these come with their own identities. So therefore, several functional identities. If there are several functional identities, then the nature of my decision making becomes so very difficult. No, when we are driving on a straight road, when we are on Sheikh Zayed Road, driving straight, possibly, and no traffic, we are on a cruise mode, possibly we don't really need to make any decisions. We keep going comfortably. But then comes a junction and we need to decide which exit to take. Comes a crossroad, an intersection. And then we start asking questions. What is the right exit to take? What is the right direction to take? Isn't it? Unfortunately for us, our life journey is not a straight road. There are series of intersections that keep coming all the time, which means whether we like it or not, we have to constantly be taking decisions all the time. In terms of the direction that we take, it's a different matter that we don't really consciously decide most of the times. We may not be really noticing that we are actually taking decisions all the time and taking different directions. Every situation presents a crossroad and we are choosing a side, but most often we are unconsciously choosing sides. We are not taking the decision. Somebody else is taking. Who is that somebody? Somebody in my mind. Every time we are presented with a crossroad, we have to take decisions. That is when the question comes, what is the right thing to do? This is what Arjuna is asking. Now, to know what is the right thing to do, first I have to know what I think I am. What is the identity with which I will identify? If I am identifying myself as someone, that is what is going to determine the right action. Now, Krishna therefore looks at Arjuna and says, hey Arjuna, the question is not what is right thing to do. The question is, who am I? What is my true identity? Beyond all the functional identities that we have, there is a foundational identity. Each of us have same identities. Our actual nature at core, our essence is the same. Beyond all layers of complex functional identities, operational identities, the foundational identity is the same. It is knowing this foundational identity. Arjuna was asking, should I be a Kurunandana or should I be a Kshatriya? Arjuna says, first and foremost, you should know foundationally you are the Atman. First, recognize that. Once we are rooted in our foundational identity, it becomes easy for us to witness the conflict in our functional identities and then take the right decision. Then we are not swayed by the forces of these operating identities. Otherwise, at one moment, I have to do actions based on one identity, immediately I have to switch, and that switching is not easy. And in the process of switching, the hangover of one identity comes over to the other, and I end up doing all wrong actions. So it is very important. Therefore, Krishna says, hey Arjuna, realize your foundational, and that foundational identity is what is the Atman. You are the Atman, hey Arjuna. So immediately, when Krishna declares that we have to know the Atman, pop comes the question, is Atman scientifically proven? Because we all want to know whether whatever our Shastras say, is it scientific? Is it scientifically proven? What we need to understand right at the beginning of any spiritual journey is that there is a place for science, no doubt. But science only deals with the study of matter. But Gita and our Shastras deal with study of what matters. Science deals with study of matter, but Gita deals with the study of what matters. Science doesn't help us to realize priorities in life. Science is neither moral or immoral, it is amoral. There is no ethical foundation to science. There can be scientific foundation to ethics. No ethical foundation to science. So therefore, science has its own limitations. It deals with the realm of matter, gross matter, to some extent subtle matter. No, when I say subtle matter, mind, intelligence, are subtle matter. Even there, science struggles. And then there is beyond the gross matter and subtle matter, there is another dimension to reality, which is spiritual in nature. That's where science stops. And what we need to realize that if we have to apply the knowledge of matter effectively, we need to necessarily acquire the knowledge of what matters in life. This was Arjuna's problem. Arjuna was well equipped with archery. To win on the battlefield, Arjuna had all the skills, knowledge of matter. But to put that knowledge of matter to use effectively, he needed the knowledge of what matters in life. So that is why our life journey starts to get enriched the moment we start to understand reality beyond the realm of matter. Reality that is beyond the realm, which is not directly perceivable. And that is why we need the Shastras. And that is why Krishna starts off the second chapter and his exposition of the Gita with a foundation on the nature of the Atman. Atman means apnoti iti Atman, Atmanaha. That which dwells, that which pervades. Inside every physical body, there is that spiritual essence which pervades the body, which indwells the body. That is the Atma. That is why I keep saying self or even soul does not do justice to understanding this spiritual entity. All of us have two dimensions. Our existence is two-dimensional. We have a physical dimension and we have the spiritual dimension. And in each and every one of us, there is that spiritual essence, that core, which is the Atman. The rest of the stack is matter. So when we start asking the question, who am I? I am not my senses. I am not my body. I am not my mind. I am not my intellect. I am not my prana. I am beyond that. I am the Atman. This is where Krishna starts off. So the beauty is, Arjuna asks a question and he wants Krishna to agree to his argument. This is how the conversation starts. Arjuna is forcefully presenting arguments to Krishna as to why he should not be fighting. And within his heart, he is hoping that Krishna will agree to his argument. But then Krishna completely takes him by surprise. Ashochan anvashochastvam prajnavadamscha bhashase gatasu nagatasumscha nanushochanti pandita. This is the first shloka, which is the beginning of the exposition of the Gita. Until then, it is Arjuna's lamentation and Arjuna's confusion. The way Krishna starts, Arjuna is presented an argument and saying, he presents a very sound argument as to why he should not fight the war. Arjuna, the warrior, is arguing with Krishna as to why he should not be fighting. And he presents and he is waiting for an answer. And what Krishna does, Arjuna is talking about death. Krishna, instead of talking about death, shifts his focus to life. Arjuna is talking about death because he does not understand the meaning of death. Death is not the annihilation of existence. Arjuna thinks death brings one's journey to a standstill. Krishna expands Arjuna's perspective. And how he does that is so beautiful, so magical. Ashochan anvashochastvam prajnavadamscha bhashase. Hey Arjuna, you are talking like a learned person, but then all your arguments are so very flimsy. They do not really stand on the foundation of logic. Ashochan anvasho. You are grieving for something which is not worthy of grief. You are mourning for something which is not worthy of mourning. Because you do not understand. You do not understand that nothing that you see around, no one that you see around will cease to exist. There is what you think of death is completely wrong. He stops Arjuna. Arjuna is being accelerating, going in one direction. Krishna stops him then and there in order for him to take a U-turn because Arjuna was taking a completely wrong direction. Now, what we need to see here is Krishna is presenting two important principles to Arjuna here. First, he needs to address immediately Arjuna's misunderstanding of death. Arjuna's misunderstanding of death and Arjuna's misunderstanding of his own identity. At the same time, he also has to address Arjuna's core issue of attachment, because it is Arjuna's attachment to his own people. Asthana sneha karunya dharma adharma diyakulam. The conflict, the confusion in dharma and adharma is coming only because of Arjuna's attachments to people. Even in our own day-to-day lives, the dilemmas that we face, which seem to be very, very difficult to resolve, are primarily because of our own attachments. So Krishna has to address both of this. So that is the reason why, unless the knowledge of the Atman is acquired, it becomes very difficult to overcome the forces that always keep us in completely trapped to the material world. That is why why science cannot really help in understanding how we can overcome the challenges, our emotional challenges, for example. That is because science can only go up to a certain extent. Beyond that, we need the knowledge of the Atman. Otherwise, we can, there are so many fears that we can never overcome if we do not understand our own nature of the Atman. Technology has been increasing year after year, century after century, but then the number of fears are also increasing. Technology is in no way, advancement in science have in no way arrested the growth of any of your fears. If only that, it's not just the fear, the quantum of fear, the number of fears also growing. As technology increases, we get to see new kinds of fears. Suddenly now these youngsters come and say, FOMO. I don't know what this FOMO fear. I have FOMO. The social media, fear of missing out, right? I also got to know this, a couple of years back. People are discussing FOMO. What is this FOMO? The fear of missing out. New fear. When we were all young, we never had this kind of a fear. There are some fears that we know of, but every decade passes by, new fears are coming in. Now all of us have fear of losing our mobiles now. This was never there 20 years back. Fear of losing Wi-Fi. If Wi-Fi is lost, finished, life is gone. Fear of losing mobiles. A man went to hurried to a police station. He was frantic. He said, "My God, you have to help me. You have to help me. I lost my phone." Calm down. You lost your phone. Try to find out where was the phone last time. It was with my wife. Where is she? I lost her as well. New kinds of fears. Now, how do we address these kinds of fears? Arjuna's fear of death, Arjuna's fear of ceasing to exist, cannot be addressed with just normal medication. That is why Krishna in second chapter gives a concoction. It's like an emergency patient who comes. He cannot be given vitamins. He has to be treated properly. So the second chapter therefore starts on a very lofty note, grand note. Tatvevaham jatunasam natvam neme janadipa nachaiva nabhavishyamaha sarve vayamata param. Krishna makes a very categorical declaration looking at Arjuna. Arjuna, what is this? You are grieving that he will die, you will die, she will die. What is this? Natvevaham jatunasam natvam neme janadipa. There was never a time when I, you, or any of these kings did not exist, nor we shall cease to exist in the future. All are eternal. Straight away, Arjuna is talking about death. Krishna is talking about the eternality of the essence. Arjuna is talking about one small frame of life. Arjuna is talking about, look at the entire series of lifetimes. Look at the innumerable frames of life. The core, the essence in each and every one is eternal. There is no death. The form that this essence, the spiritual core acquires, that form keeps changing. So that change of form is what we call as death. So Arjuna is immediately told there is no need for you to grieve. There is no need, because look at the eternality of this Atman. Atman is eternal here, Arjuna. Now, there are two things that Krishna is doing right at the beginning. He is addressing Arjuna's core issue of fear of death on one hand. Now he also has to address his attachment. Now, this is where we also need to look at what Krishna says and what he does not say as well. Sometimes when some advice is given to someone, it is very important to note what is said and, more importantly, what is not said. So we also have to see here what Krishna says and what he doesn't say. He doesn't look at Arjuna and says, "Hey Arjuna, you have to give up all these attachments that you have." He doesn't say that, because Krishna knows that one can say 100 times, 1,000 times, give up attachments. Not going to happen. I can keep telling myself, I have to give up this attachment, I have to give this 100 times, 1000 times every day. At best, attachments can become little subtle. They will never vanish. Krishna also knows this. So immediately the question asks is, then how attachments will go? Attachments can only go by knowing something higher. Attachments can only shift location. Attachments will never vanish. They shift location. They're always relative. I'll give you an analogy for you to understand this. There was this lady who had a gold bangle, very old gold bangle, became very dirty, misshapen. So she had to take it to the goldsmith and said, now you have to convert this gold bangle into a nice chain, gold chain or gold necklace. Now, this lady is attached to gold, no doubt, but she is not attached to the form of the gold. When the goldsmith is working on the gold bangle and changing it into a gold chain, she does not start crying. The form is changing, the bangle is vanishing. The form bangle is vanishing and a new form is taking place. Now, this lady is not crying because she is not attached to the form of gold, but she is attached to the gold. Why? Because she is still staying there. She is not left. She is not come home. She is attached to the gold. She doesn't want to leave the gold. She is there overseeing the goldsmith while he is working on it, changing the form. So therefore, there is one type of attachment to the form. All of us have attachment to forms. Now, this attachment of the form can only shift. It shifts from attachment to the form to attachment to the essence, from the form to a bangle to the gold. Now, the location of the attachment can also keep changing. Now, the lady comes back. She brings this chain. Very, very happy now. She has a beautiful chain, gold chain, brand new looking. And then she comes home. She's so very attached to it. She comes home and her little daughter comes and says, Mama, I want it. What will she do? Immediately she will give. Where is the attachment gone now? The attachment is still there. It is only shifted from gold to her daughter. Attachment is still there. It's changing location. So what is happening here is attachments keep shifting from one to the other. The location of the attachment can keep shifting, but attachment is still there. Now, I will detach from something if I get to know of something higher than that. We all know this. Our children, the moment you take them a new toy, until then they were holding on to an old toy. The moment a new toy comes, the old toy is thrown very easily. Why children? All of us. iPhone 14, that's our life. 15 comes, 14 goes. Attachment shifts. The shifting happens the moment we start knowing that something is higher. So the only way for us to overcome our attachments is to start shifting the location of the attachment, lower to higher, lower to higher, 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 higher. This is exactly what Krishna is trying to do to Arjuna and to all of us through the Gita journey. Eventually, Krishna's will is for all of us only to be attached to him. The highest of the higher. That will come. We are still in second chapter. But here if you see, straight away, Natvevaham jatunasam natvam neme janadipaha nachaiva nabhavishyamaha sarvevaya matahparam. Immediately, two things he does. He addresses Arjuna's fear of death by shifting the focus to the eternality of the Atman, and he also addresses Arjuna's core problem of attachment and helps him to shift his location of attachment, move him higher so that he can come out of his very lower attachments that are ruling him. And then he immediately adds, Hey Arjuna, dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tatha dehantara praptihi dhiraha tatrana muhyati. Dhira, a truly wise person, he will not grieve, Hey Arjuna. Why? Because he knows that for the core essence in everyone, there is no end. There is no end. It is eternal. Just like how he gives a beautiful example. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara. Even this body is constantly undergoing change. Whether we notice or not, it is undergoing change. Whether we want it or not, it is undergoing change. We are only aging. Every day we are aging. Every moment we are aging. And even within this body, hundreds and thousands of cells are dying and hundreds and thousands of cells are taking birth. Regeneration is happening all the time. So therefore, the body of a child is so very different to the body of a youth, so very different to a body of an adult, so very different to a body of a old age person. Now, through all these changes in the form, the Dehi, the Atman, the indweller in the body, is passing through these changes. He is being the indweller, he is going through. The form, the embodiment is going through changes. And there will come a time when the utility of the body will come to an end. And then just like how the Dehi, the indwelling Atman, passed from childhood to boyhood to adulthood to old age, will eventually pass on to another body, once again begin childhood to go on to boyhood to adulthood. So this cycle is going to go on. So therefore, dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tata dehantara prapti. After this deha, this body ceases to function. There will come a time when its utility is gone, it's finished. There is a reason, there is a purpose for this body. Until the purpose is fulfilled, the body will work. But there will come a time, just like how boyhood changed to adulthood, just like how adulthood changed to old age, there will a time come when from this body, another body, and the journey will go on. So therefore, the Dehi, the indweller, the Atman, should not be really worried, should not really grieve. We do not grieve when we are moving from boyhood to adulthood. We are actually celebrating. Every birthday comes, we celebrate. It's a different story that we don't admit our age, but we celebrate. Just like that, Krishna is saying we have to celebrate death. Very difficult to digest. But then if we are celebrating moving from boyhood to adulthood, why shouldn't one celebrate moving from one body to the other? Dhiraha tatrana muhyati, he says. So therefore, he is straight away addressing Arjuna's question as to, hey Arjuna, you think all the people around are going to cease to exist? They are not going to exist. The kind of body that you're seeing, the form, that may cease, that will change. But each and every one of them will continue because they were there in the past, they are here, they will continue to be in future. Matra sparshastu kaunteya sitoshna sukha dukkadaha agama payino anityaha tam stitikshasva bharata. This is the first lesson in the Gita. First spiritual lesson. After giving philosophy, immediately application of knowledge. See, the beauty of Gita is Krishna gives us a good mix throughout the Gita. He gives profound philosophy, immediately he packages it with practical application. That is why Gita is relevant to us from time immemorial. It was relevant 5,000 years back, it will be relevant 5,000 years in the future. Because it has The philosophy, it has the knowledge and it has the practical application of knowledge. What is the first lesson in the Gita? If somebody asks, the first lesson in the Gita is to enable us to lessen our resistance to change. That's the first lesson. Lesson is to lessen our resistance to change, because we are always resisting change, knowing that change is inevitable. This world is subject to law of impermanence, whether we like it or not. Everything is changing all the time, constantly. We deny, we ignore, we resist. First we resist, then we rant, then we rave, then we deny. This is what we do, because we can't accept, because the changes that are happening are not easily digestible. Our body is changing, everything around us is changing, the world is changing. Now, Krishna, therefore, the first lesson, the lesson, the knowledge of the Atman enables us to decrease, to lessen this resistance to change. That is what Krishna says, Matra sparshastu kaunteya, he kaunteya, he Kunti putra, Matra sparshastu kaunteya, sitoshna sukha dukkadaha. The senses interact with the sense objects. The senses in the body, the eye, the nose, the ear, their function, they are designed to interact with the sense objects. That's their design. So they will continue to interact. And what is the outcome of this interaction? Sitoshna sukha dukkadaha. Sita, Ushna, alternating experiences all the time. Pain and pleasure keeps alternating all the time. Every engagement with the world, every engagement our senses has with the sense objects, the outcome can only be two, black or white. And it's alternating all the time, pain, pleasure, pain, pleasure. Sitoshna sukha dukkadaha. Agamopayina anityaha. Anityaha. What comes will go. If pain comes, it has to go. If pleasure comes, it also has to go. We cannot just hold on to pleasure and hope that pain will never come. They always come. Dualities. Dvandva. That's the nature of matter, material world. Agamopayina anityaha. These are all anitya. They are not nitya. You are nitya, Arjuna. The Atman is nitya, but every engagement with the world is anitya. Keeps changing all the time, subject to the law of impermanence, subject to the law of fragility of everything in life. Tam sthiti kshasva bharata. Therefore, you have to tolerate. Tam sthiti kshasva. You have to tolerate. So, the moment we realize this, our resistance to change comes down dramatically. We realize that we can neither hold on to pleasure nor we can evade pain. We keep coming and going all the time. And as long as we are alive, our senses have to interact with the sense objects. We cannot go ourselves shut inside a cave and say, I will disengage from this world. We are engaged in this world all the time. And when we are engaged in this world, some things will bring good experiences, some things will bring bad experiences. It's always an admixture. And therefore, tam sthiti kshasva bharata. Bharata, the only way is to tolerate these fluctuations, these alterations that are happening all the time, knowing that you are above and beyond, knowing that these alterations don't belong to you. Beyond pain and pleasure is the real bliss, which is our right. That's our true nature. So beyond these fluctuations which are going on, hey Bharata, hey Arjuna, realize that pain and pleasure belong to your operational identities, not to your foundational identity. Bliss is the right of your foundational identity. We are all blissful by nature. As long as we are not misidentified with the body, we can easily access that bliss. When we are misidentified with the body, which means all our identities are only based on the body and bodily relationships, then we are subject to the forces of dualities of life. We are subject to this alternating experiences which are going to torment us all the time. So Krishna says you need to necessarily tolerate them, knowing that you are different and distinct from each and every of these engagements that are happening with the world here, Arjuna. Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va naboyaha ajo nityaha shashvatoyam puranaha na hanyate hanyamane sharire. A very, very profound definition of who we are. So when somebody asks, who are you? This is the definition we have to give. If you give it in satsang, people will really appreciate. Outside of satsang, they'll think you've gone mad. And they will say, who has been teaching all these things to you? Bring that person to me. I will see, I think he is also gone mad. A brilliant definition of our true identity, of the Atma. When we start realizing our true nature, we start to gain a sense of security, which is impossible with any worldly security. No worldly security can give us that security which comes out of knowing who we are. I can have $100 million in my bank account. I can have 10 mansions. That's not going to bring me any security. Without any of this, I can be the most secure, completely being rooted in the awareness of who I am. Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va nabhuyaha ajaha nityaha shashvataha puranaha nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Now, here, Krishna, while defining the Atman, is also contrasting the Atman with the body. What is the Atman? What is the body? Straight away. The body is subject to modifications all the time. The body is made out of matter, Prakriti, which is subject to modifications. The body goes through modifications all throughout its lifetime. Birth, becoming, growth, transformation, decay, destruction. These are the various phases of modifications. Shad Vikaras, Shastras say. Now, this body is constantly going through its modification, but the Atman, the indweller, the Dehi, which is indwelling in this body, is constant. Ajaha, Nit Ajaha, unborn. The body is born, but the body is born because every time a new form comes in. This form goes, a new form comes in. So it's born. So birth essentially is nothing but a new embodiment, a new configuration is birth. The Atman acquiring a new form, a new name, that is birth. Death is when the form changes. One form, just like taking the example of the bangle becoming chain, a mud becoming a pot becoming another vessel, changes in form. The ingredients are the same. Even the matter does not perish. This is what even science also says, right? Not everything is there. Energy is neither destroyed nor created, science says. Matter is also not created or destroyed, it exists forever. The form keeps changing. Prakriti is also eternal, but the forms keep changing. Therefore, Ajaha, who is the Atman? What is the nature of the Atman? The Atman, each and every one of us, the Atman, the Jivatma, is Ajaha, unborn. Ajaha, Nityaha, eternal. Shashvataha, everlasting. Puranaha, ancient. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. The body, the Sharira can be slain, but the Atman cannot be slain. The Atman cannot be cut with a knife. The Atman cannot be wetted with water, cannot be dried with air. The Atman is beyond this body, above and beyond, distinct and different. It existed before, it exists now, it will exist forever. Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va nabhuyaha ajaha nityaha shashvataha puranaha nahanyate hanyamane sharire. After having defined the Atman, after having given the knowledge of the Atman, immediately with clarification on the identity, Krishna jumps into the next topic and talks about knowing this true identity, how do I do right actions? This is where he introduces Karma Yoga, the very famous, the much celebrated verse, possibly also misunderstood verse also, I should say, because Karmanyevadhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana ma karma pala heturbhuhu ma te sangostu akarmani. Karmanyevadhikaraste. You have right only to what you do. You have right over your actions. Karmanyevadhikaraste. Mahapaleshu kada ma karma palate heturbhuhu mate sangostu akarmani. You do not have right to inaction, which means you cannot escape your duties. You have to perform. Very important. You have your duty you must do. You cannot escape. Karvanyevadhikaraste, you have right over your action completely. Immediately says, Ma paleshu kadachana. While you have right over your action, you have no right over the fruits of the action, which essentially means you do not have control over your actions. Control over the result of your actions. Krishna is not saying results are immaterial. Many times we loosely say, Krishna says results don't matter. No, results do matter. Very important. But Krishna is saying, while results matter, you do not have complete control over the results. Your effort is necessary but not sufficient. Our effort is necessary but not sufficient for a particular result, because there are several other factors which are beyond our control. All Krishna is saying, he is not saying don't work for results. He is saying work for great results, not something which is very, very mundane, not something, those children here, he's saying don't just study for marks, study for mastery over the subject, study for a learned mind. For adults, he's saying don't just work to earn money, work to contribute big, to make a huge impact on the society. He's not saying results don't matter, he's saying results matter, but he's talking about a higher cause which must be driving every action that we do. And he's also shifting our focus from the result to the action itself. Because common sense tells us that action is what we have some control. Result, we have no control. That's very clear. I think there should be no doubt on this whatsoever. It's all of us agree on that. But then we pin all our happiness only on the result, not on the action. So which means we are pinning our happiness on something over which we have no control. All Krishna is saying is pin your happiness on something over which you have control. So which means by shifting the focus to the action, derive happiness out of the very act, and not pin your happiness on something over which you have no control. Ma phaleshu kadachana. You have no control on the results of the action. Ma karma phala heturbhu. Also realize that you alone is not the cause of the results. Whenever I do something, I am not the only cause of the results. I need to necessarily recognize that there are so many others who have contributed to that cause. We all think whenever something good, immediately we take credit. It's all because of me. But when something bad happens and we're looking around, who we can blame. The cause of any outcome, we are not the sole cause. Krishna says, recognize that. And when we recognize that, then we also can accept the result, the outcome that comes out of every action with grace, with His grace and gracefully. And when we accept, with that acceptance also comes a responsibility for the outcome. Take responsibility. So that with the awareness of what has happened, we can further do right actions. So Karma Yoga essentially is bringing focus on the action, on the process, and not on the product. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana ma karma pala heturbhoho mate sangostu akarmani. And then he moves to the last segment of the second chapter, where he talks about the Sthita Prajna, the man of steady wisdom. The man of steady wisdom, Sthita Prajna, is one who has not only acquired the knowledge of the Atman, he has assimilated it. When one assimilates, digests, it then naturally manifests as right actions. Sthita Prajna is one who has assimilated knowledge, so he can deal with the dualities of life so very easily. This knowledge becomes like a shield, protective shield. Whether we like it or not, rain will or will not come, we cannot control. But when rain comes, I have a choice to still go out using a raincoat. I cannot complain that rain is coming. I cannot stop the rain, but I can continue to work using a raincoat. So some Sthita Prajna is one who doesn't complain, who doesn't blame, who doesn't look for excuses, because the world is filled with dualities, because the world is subject to the law of impermanence. He deals with impermanence with an equipoised mind, with a steady mind. Apuryamanam achalapatishtam samudramapaha pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamaya pravishanti sarve sashantimapnoti nakamakami. The mind of a Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna is one who is complete in itself, in himself. Just like an ocean, Krishna gives a beautiful analogy of an ocean. The ocean is full. All the rivers go into the ocean, but the ocean doesn't care. Whether a river comes into it or not comes into it doesn't bother the ocean. There are sacred rivers, there are polluted rivers. A sacred river does not make the ocean more sacred. A polluted river does not make an ocean more polluted. The ocean is steady, irrespective of a river comes to it or not. A river may dry up, doesn't matter. A river can go to the ocean and say, from tomorrow I will not come and join you. The ocean will only laugh. Whether you come or you don't come, it doesn't matter to me. Alternately, you are existing only because of me. The ocean. A Sthita Prajna, Krishna gives this example. The world bombards us with stimuli, with stimuli which we cannot easily handle. A Sthita Prajna is one, in spite of this bombardment, he is like an ocean which is complete. He doesn't need nakamakami. There is no emotional dependence on anyone or anything. We all think we are all independent. We are all dependent. We all are leading our lives on crutches. Why do I say that? We are emotionally dependent on people, on even things. Sometimes we are more emotionally dependent on things than people. Unfortunately, materialism has seeped in so much that we depend more on the phone, on somebody else. Our dependence on our belongings, on our possessions is so much. Therefore, nakamakami, he is somebody who has no emotional dependence. He is emotionally stable, emotionally mature. He is equipoised, steady-minded. And that is the state of Sthita Prajnatva that Krishna concludes in the second chapter. He says, by doing work rooted in detachment, based on the principles of Karma Yoga, for which one needs the knowledge of the Atman, by acquiring the knowledge of the Atman, and doing our work rooted in detachment, based on the principles of Karma Yoga, one can reach that supreme state, the Brahmi Sthiti. Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha. Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati, he says. Once you reach that state, there is no more delusion, Arjuna. Once you reach that state, there is no more that delusion. Titva Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Richati. That's how he concludes the second chapter. Sitvasi Antakalepi. At the time of death, when one makes the spiritual progress and has acquired and reached that highest state, then when death comes, that Atman is not leaving home, he or she is going home. For an Atman which is seeped in material world, when death comes, continues to be in the cycle. But liberation is about not leaving home, it is going home. The rest of the Gita is Krishna charting the pathway for all of us as to how we all can take the path that can take us to our home, where we actually belong. Because this world is only a station, not a destination. And therefore, Gita is all about how we can say farewell to life by faring well in this very life. So the second chapter of the Gita, therefore, is so very foundational that Krishna gives us Sankhya Yoga, the knowledge of the Atman, and Karma Yoga. Now, Karma Yoga has been dealt with in short, in brief, in second chapter. All of us will have so many questions on the principle of Karma Yoga. So therefore, immediately Krishna in the third chapter expands on what is Karma Yoga. Third chapter is titled Karma Yoga, which we will relish next month. Until then, let us continue to contemplate on our original identity. Najayate mriyate va kadachinnayam bhutva bhavitavana bhuyaha ajo nityaha shashvatoyam puranaha na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Sri Krishna.